Okay, students, we were doing the chapter of ecology. We are done with one of the nutrient cycle, that is um, carbon cycle. Today we have to start nitrogen cycle. These nutrient cycles I told you in the last lecture that are helpful to maintain the different factors in the environment, and these factors are to be kept near to constant to let the life forms survive on planet Earth. Let's get on with nitrogen cycle. What nitrogen cycle is? It is a process by which nitrogen is converted between its various chemical forms. This transition or transformation can be carried out through both biological and physical processes. This diagram that I have shown you will be understood by you after going through the whole cycle. But for now, for this slide, just remember that nitrogen cycle is actually the conversion of different forms of nitrogen from one to another. Nitrogen cycle, before we start it, we should know some facts. We know that about 79 to 80%, and in some textbooks it is written 78% of air contains nitrogen gas. This nitrogen gas is inert. Inert means that it is unreactive. It is an inorganic form of nitrogen, and this inert form cannot be used by plants. For this reason, this gaseous unreactive form of nitrogen is to be converted to form into some form that can be used by plants. Now question arises, why do plants need to have this nitrogen? Nitrogen is the key element for the formation of amino acids. You know, amino acids are the building block of proteins. So to make proteins, plants need to have nitrogen. Then they are also required, nitrogen is also required for the formation of nucleic acid. It may be DNA or RNA. It is also required for the formation of chlorophyll and some vitamins. When this nitrogen is made available to the plants, these plants would make up protein in them, and those plants are then fed by animals and humans, by which that plant protein which was formed in the plant is now transferred from the plant to animals. The proteins of the plant is eaten, and then it is digested and absorbed by the animals or humans in the form of amino acid. If you remember your chapter of animal nutrition, we read that protein is a complex compound and it should be broken down into simpler compounds to be used in a human body. So amino acid, when they are absorbed, they will reunite or recombine in different manners to form different protein in the animal or human body depending upon the need. Now, whenever that human or animal would die or would excrete nitrogenous waste, those compounds or those dead decaying bodies of animals and plants would contain the nitrogen form. Those nitrogen forms would be complex in nature and should again be brought back to their simpler forms. If you remember, in our last lesson, I told you about decomposers. Decomposers are bacteria and fungus. Their function is to convert complex organic compounds into simpler compounds so that they can be diffused into the plant cells. So here assimilation means that how the nitrogen in the air is made available to animals and plants, how they assimilate that nitrogen in their body. It is in the form of proteins. Before again starting the nitrogen cycle, you should be familiar with the organic nitrogen ions and inorganic form of nitrogen. The organic nitrogen forms are ammonium ions, nitrite ions, nitrate ions, nitrous oxide, and nitric oxide. Sometimes in the cycle the formulas are given, so you should be familiar with them as well. Inorganic nitrogen form is nitrogen gas, which is N2. Two atoms of nitrogen are bonded together by 3 covalent bonds. So it's a strong bond, and that makes it inert or unreactive or difficult to be broken down. Okay, nitrogen gas is now in the air, and our point is, or our aim is to convert it into such forms that can be used by the plants. There are three ways by which the atmospheric nitrogen gas is converted to ionic form. First point is by nitrogen fixing bacteria. These are some kind of bacteria. I will tell you in detail in our later slides that where they are located and what they are doing. Second point is by the heat generated by lightning during thunderstorms. When thunderstorms come, there is lightning, and lightning produces a lot of electric discharge, which is actually a lot of heat. That heat does something in the atmosphere which causes the formation of some ionic forms of nitrogen, which again I will explain you in our slides ahead. And then there is an artificial method or industrial nitrogen fixation. This is done in industries, if you remember from your chemistry lessons, Haber's process, whereby you use nitrogen and hydrogen in the presence of high pressure and catalyst and convert them into some other compound forms. I will tell you again what these forms are and how they can be utilized in plants growth. Actually, it is the formation of fertilizers that we do here in this process. First of all, is the first point that we are going to discuss is nitrogen fixation by nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now, by now you should be clear with the term nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation means to convert nitrogen in the air, or you can say the gaseous nitrogen form, or you can say the conversion of atmospheric nitrogen. Into what forms? Now we'll see in which forms these are this nitrogen gas is converted. Nitrogen fixing converts nitrogen gas from the air into nitrate ions. Nitrogen fixing bacteria do that, and where they are located, if you see the diagram, I have shown you the structures of root nodules of legume plants. So I have used several terms here. Legume plants are those with beans. For understanding, let's understand this term. It's a kind of a plant, dicot plant. This plant have beans mostly, just like beans and peas and soya beans. Their root contains some knot-like structures. These are called root nodules. These root nodules contain certain bacteria which are responsible for this nitrogen fixing. What kind of bacteria? One example I have written here, Rhizobium. Then there is Cyanobacteria. All these kind of bacteria which are residing in the root nodules of the leguminous plants are responsible for conversion of atmospheric nitrogen into nitrate ions. This is called nitrogen fixation by nitrification. So now if you see, I have written a simple diagram here. I have shown you that ammonium ions are being converted to nitrite ions, and nitrite ions are converted to nitrate ions. This conversion of different ionic forms from one to another is done by bacteria again. These bacteria are called nitrifying bacteria. The atmospheric nitrogen was fixed by nitrogen fixing bacteria to ammonium ions. Now that ammonia can be used by certain plants, but again some plants are unable to use it. They can use it in the form of nitrite ions or nitrate ions. So now what we want to do is to convert that ammonia into nitrite or nitrate ions. This is again done by some bacteria, for example Nitrosomonas or Nitrobacter. These bacteria are called nitrifying bacteria, which convert ammonium ions to nitrite and nitrate ions. This is also nitrogen fixation because we are still converting the forms that are not being used by plants into some forms that can be used by the plants. So we are actually fixing the nitrogen into some usable forms of nitrogen. Next is nitrogen fixation by lightning. I told you in our previous slides that lightning is actually electric discharge or discharge of electrons. It's a high energy voltage phenomenon whereby heat is produced. This heat, what it does, it causes the reaction between the atmospheric nitrogen and oxygen. If you see, normally nitrogen and oxygen do not react in the atmosphere. They both are inert gases like noble gases. But when the heat is being provided, these two react and forms oxides of nitrogen. These oxides of nitrogen on reaching the Earth's surface would react with mineral compounds, for example calcium, to form nitrates of that mineral ions. For example, calcium nitrate, if it is reacting with calcium nitrate would be formed. And there are other nitrogenous compounds also which can be produced by this process. So thing is that we are converting the atmospheric nitrogen first to oxides of nitrogen. Those oxides of nitrogen sometimes can be used as it is, but most of the times they need to be converted to nitrates ion or nitrite ions. This will be done by the reaction of oxides of nitrogen with certain mineral compounds that you don't need to know in your syllabus. The reaction of these mineral compounds with oxides of nitrogen would yield nitrate ions or nitrite ions and various other nitrogenous compounds which can then be used by the producers. This is Haber's process. Industrial nitrogen fixation is the another name given to it. Again, it is nitrogen fixation because we are converting the inert form of nitrogen into a form that can be utilized by the plant. Under great pressure it is done at high temperature around 600 Celsius and with the use of catalyst. Iron is the catalyst used here. Hydrogen and atmospheric nitrogen are then combined to give ammonia ions. This is utilized as fertilizers by the farmers to increase the yield of plants. Obviously, when you are providing them with more nitrogenous compound, they will take it in and will produce more protein, and that protein is required for the formation of new protoplasm. So when newer cells are being formed, it will obviously increase the growth of the plants. This is denitrification. This is the last step of the nitrogen cycle. Denitrification is the reduction of nitrates, or you can say conversion of nitrates back to the nitrogen gas. We need to maintain that 78% of nitrogen gas in the environment. So if by lightning or by Haber's process or by nitrogen fixing bacteria in the root nodules of leguminous plants, we keep on converting the nitrogen gas to ionic form, the atmospheric balance of nitrogen gas would get disturbed. If you are understanding this point, I can repeat it again, that by the three processes that we have already gone through, by nitrogen fixing bacteria, by Haber's process, by lightning phenomenon, all these three processes were converting the atmospheric nitrogen gas into nitrate ions or nitrite ions or ammonium ions. So if we keep on doing that, the balance in the environmental or atmospheric nitrogen gas would get disturbed. So there should be a balance between the forms of nitrogen to keep the ecosystem in balance. So this is done by denitrifying bacteria. These are bacteria living freely in the soil. What do? They convert the excess nitrate ions back to the nitrogen gas. The diagram here is showing you the nitrogen cycle briefly with the diagram. atmospheric nitrogen is converted by rhizobium. This is the bacteria which was lying in the root nodules of leguminous plants. Then there is lightning. Both of them are converting the atmospheric nitrogen to ammonium ions. Then nitrifying bacteria were converting ammonia into nitrate ions. These nitrate ions were taken up by the producers. Producers utilize this nitrate ion, absorb them and make their protein. Then that plant or that food product made by the plant is eaten by animals and humans. Hence we are actually getting the nitrogen or protein from the producers. When both of them die or excrete their nitrogenous waste, they get to have decomposed by the decomposers. They have to be decomposed. So when they decay, then again ammonium ions are released into the soil. They are again converted by nitrifying bacteria back to nitrate ions, and this cycle continues. On the other hand, if the nitrate ions are surplus in the soil or more in the soil, more than the need of the plants, they would be converted back to atmospheric nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria. This is another diagram to make you understand the process of nitrogen cycle. It's very easy. You see that we have atmospheric nitrogen at the top. What happening is that lightning and nitrogen fixing is causing the conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to ammonium ions. Then nitrification is done by certain bacteria to convert the ammonium ions into nitrites and then to nitrates. Or remember that the conversion of ammonium to nitrites and nitrites conversion to nitrate, both of these processes would be called as nitrification. Then nitrates are taken up by the plants, absorbed by root hair cells. Root hair cells would absorb them by active transport, and plants would make up their protein in them. Those plants are eaten up or being fed by the animals and humans. Animals would get decomposed by decomposers. You can add the point of excretory material here, which is nitrogenous waste. These decomposers then add ammonium ions back to the soil, which is again converted by nitrifying bacteria to nitrites and nitrates, and the cycle continues. If you can see that the surplus nitrates are then converted back to atmospheric nitrogen by denitrifying bacteria. So if you see in the nitrogen cycle, there are two cycles going on. If you want to divide them into two parts, one cycle is the one with conversion of atmospheric nitrogen to nitrates and by denitrifying bacteria back to the atmospheric nitrogen. And then there is another cycle where the ammonium ions are converted to nitrate ions and then in the proteins in animals and plants, which are decomposed back to ammonium ions. So this cycle is also going on within the nitrogen cycle. So this is the diagram that I showed you in our former slides, and I told you that you would get to understand this only after the end of the lecture. So if you see here again, I have shown you the presence of atmospheric nitrogen, how it is fixed, how it is converted to ammonium ions and then to nitrite and nitrate ions by nitrification, then assimilated in the plants, consumed by the animals, and then these animals after decomposition would change their protein. Their protein would be changed by decomposers back to ammonium ions, then nitrate ions, and if you see that these nitrate ions are given back to the atmosphere by denitrification, by denitrifying bacteria. So these are the two circles. The past paper includes one very important question, that what is the role of bacteria in nitrogen cycle. So if you see, there are three bacteria that are involved here. There are nitrogen fixing bacteria, there are nitrifying bacteria, there are denitrifying bacteria. I said three bacteria, which is wrong because we haven't added decomposers into them. So we have four types of bacteria which are working in the nitrogen cycle. There are nitrogen fixing bacteria, there are nitrifying bacteria, there are denitrifying bacteria, and then there are decomposers, sorry. Again, this is the diagram to show you the nitrogen cycle in simpler ways. You can go through the cycle. It's similar to the previous one, except the fact that the diagrams have been changed. Information is the same. Go through the cycle and practice the cycle, or write down the main points about it, and ask me if you have any confusion.